I am from Pittsburgh, the home to such icons as Andy Warhol, Dan Marino, and Mr. Rogers.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
But the biggest star to come out of the Steel City is Bruno Sammartino. Now, don't believe me? Well, I'll have my friend Arnold here explain.
I realized that this is the star of all stars. He was the best, he was the most popular, he was huge.
Bruno Sammartino was a superstar professional wrestler. And I mean superstar.
You can hear this compassionate crowd chanting, Bruno, Bruno, Bruno.
He sold out Madison Square Garden a whopping 188 times. That's more than Billy Joel, U2, the Rolling Stones, and Janet Jackson combined. In 1959, he was the strongest man in the world and held the WWE Championship Belt for 2,803 days. Meanwhile, Hulk Hogan held his WCW Championship Belt for a minor 359. But all of that almost didn't happen. How unlikely is his success story?
It's impossible. How does a 13-year-old malnourished, sickly child that doesn't know the language come to this country and is bullied?
Now the wrestler's extraordinary life story is being told in the acclaimed documentary Bruno Sammartino.
Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion, Bruno Sammartino.
Born in 1935, Bruno grew up in Italy. He came of age during the height of World War II in the small mountain town of Pizziferrato.
So my dad's early life, when he was a kid, it wasn't the best. You know, they were very poor, and then he got sick for most of his younger years. And then the war happened, and the Germans came in, and they had to flee the town, and they had to go on top of the mountain for 14 months, and they lived outside. And he was a very sickly kid. I mean, they were basically starving to death. He had rheumatic fever. So rheumatic fever, and as I found out as the years went on, it eventually is going to affect your heart as you get older.
Nazis came to their village, took over, and had at one point captured them, lined them up to be executed. His mother took his brother Paul, sister Mary, and him under her arms and said, "Don't worry, we'll never be hungry again, we'll never be cold again, we'll be in paradise with Jesus." And just then they were saved at the last minute by their own villagers who had followed the Germans and killed them right there on the spot.
I only survived because of my mom's love and care. She did everything to keep me alive.
After the war, Bruno's family immigrated to America and settled in Pittsburgh.
Steel Town, heart of America's industrial might.
They came to America in 1950. My dad was poor his whole life until he came here. He made it on his own, literally.
Yet this sickly kid wasn't met with kindness when he arrived.
And my dad was bullied. He didn't know the language. He moved to Oakland in Pittsburgh, and because he couldn't speak well and this and that, he got bullied, and he was very skinny. I mean, he was 15 years old, weighing 87 pounds, literally. You always hear about that 87-pound weakling. Well, that was for real. And so yeah, he got beat up a lot, and so that's when he started lifting weights and making himself bigger. And like he said, all the bullies disappeared after a while. So my dad set a bench press record of 565 pounds, and that's with no chemicals, no shirts, none of that stuff. And back then, you had 565 pounds, you brought it to your chest, and they counted 1,001, 1,002, and then you lifted it.
Bruno caught the attention of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the world of wrestling also came calling.
Back then, he had basically, a choice. You can do wrestling or play with the Steelers. Well, back then with the Steelers, a lineman was making $9,000 a year. And wrestling back then was 35,000. And it's all relative. So 35,000 back then to start was pretty good. So there you have it.
Wrestling didn't just become something to put food on his family's table. It also made Bruno a global phenomenon.
He was the biggest ticket on the planet at one point. He wrestled on every continent on earth. He was a mega star in Japan, wrestled in Australia, Canada, Europe, Mexico, South America. Extraordinary. And people would come out to see him, and selling out Madison Square Garden, arguably the biggest house in the world, 188 times as the headliner. People like Frank Sinatra wanted to hang with him.
When he came into the ring, people were standing and screaming and screaming and screaming. And then the fight began, and I mean, he started throwing this guy around. He lifted people up that were 400 pounds overhead. So this is how powerful he was.
Bruno was one of the globe's hottest tickets during his heyday, but those close to him say he always remained humble.
Someone who was homeless would recognize Bruno and stop in the moment and go, Bruno. And he would treat that person the same as he would treat the president of a company. I saw that many times. And the fans, all the fans in between. He would stay, sign autographs, and never blow them off, because he said, these are the people that made me who I am.
In the late 1980s, Bruno retired from the sport to which he gave so much. But his years in the ring had taken a toll.
He figures that he was body slammed over 8,000 times. 8,000 times in his career. With that, and the beatings you take in the ring, and people can say what they want, you take beatings. And the rheumatic fever, it's amazing that he even lived that long. But he took such good care of himself. He worked out all the time. He was so strict and he would never miss a workout. He would run miles and miles and miles. I mean, he was 265 pounds running 12 miles a day.
The WWE Hall of Fame came calling in 2013, and his friend Arnold did the honors.
Arnold Schwarzenegger flew off a movie set all the way from California just to do his induction speech.
In April 2018, Bruno passed away at 82, but his legacy lives on.
He says as an immigrant, he always felt like working harder. And he was so appreciative that what kind of a career he had as an immigrant coming over here to America. I appreciated so much as an Austrian to come over here. I did not go through all the stuff that he went through and the hardship and everything like that. It is, I think, one of the greatest immigration stories that anyone can think of when you talk about Bruno Sammartino.
He would say the strength of this country is in its diversity. And I would agree, because the people that are here want to be here, fought to be here in many cases. And he was also quick to point out, I'm not the only one who dealt with this, and recognized all the other families, not only in Italy, but around the world, who overcome struggles to be here. So he was very cognizant of that. And the strength of this country is the fact that it's so diverse.
My dad is 100% the American dream. Like he said, when he came to America, the roads were paved in gold. It was a way for him to make a living, and he made a better living for his family than what he had coming to America.
For InsideEdition.com, I'm Stephen Fabian.